On today's show, the Hawks dig a hole that they just simply could not get out of, and the result is a fourth consecutive loss. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2147 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening here in mid-January. And today's podcast will be diving into what became a 112-110 loss for the Hawks at home against the Milwaukee Bucks on MLK Day afternoon. I'm a big fan of the MLK Day game happening in Atlanta. It always should be there. It was today. The usual scene with choir intros, all that stuff. It's a fun day in Atlanta, but not as such a fun game for the Hawks. Now, they did come back, which is notable, which I'll talk about throughout this game, but this is a fourth consecutive loss for the Hawks. They're now 5-13 in the last 18 games, and a lot of alarm bells going off for obvious reasons. The Hawks had some highs and some lows in this game. They were at least closer to their normal strength in this one with Dyson Daniels back, and he was quite good in this game, actually, for Atlanta, but still no Ricochet, no Porzingis, and the tale of this game is pretty simple. The Hawks were actually small favorites at tip-off, according to FanDuel, with Giannis playing for the Bucks. But there's a good argument to be made that the Hawks had the worst shooting half in the history of the franchise in the first half. So if you were out and about on this holiday Monday, I wouldn't blame you for that. But the Hawks simply could not make a shot for half of this basketball game, and they were down by 16 points at halftime as a result of that. And they were down by as many as 23. To their credit, again, they came all the way back. They had the lead twice in the final minute and a half or so, plus a chance to tie the game or win the game on the final possession down 2, but they did not come up with a bucket on that play. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. And that was it. So, as usual, if you are listening to this podcast for the first time, you wouldn't know this, but if you are returning listener, you certainly would. I like to give you the whole picture, not just the top line hot takes or whatever. I like to give you some nuance, some context, etc. But the offensive end of the floor in this game was the bigger problem, which is crazy to say for the Hawks because they scored 72 points and hit 11 threes in the second half. And yet, they still had a very bad offensive game on the whole, which is crazy, but it speaks to just how dire the first half actually was. And there's the old tale of two halves trope that is often overused, but it certainly applies here for the Hawks. Like, if you just cut this game in half down the middle, it was like a disaster, and then really good in the second half. Offensively, they missed 22 consecutive threes. And it was the first 22 threes they took in the game. They made one in the final minute of the first half, and they came very close to having their worst shooting half ever, basically. They had an offensive rating under 80 in the first half, despite doing everything else pretty well. They didn't turn the ball over very much. They won the glass. They just could not make a jump shot in the first half. And in the second half, they played very well on offense. They had 11 threes, 7 of those from Alexander Walker. They had 22 assists on 24 field goals after halftime, and they almost came all the way back and pulled off the comeback because of that offensive performance. But overall, they had like a 109 or so offensive rating in this game, and that's just not going to be good enough to win most of the time. So if you just turn the game on at halftime, like, man, they played great on offense. Yeah, they did, but the first half still counts. And they were very unlucky in the first half. That just has to be said out loud. There's no pleasure in me reporting that. But when you miss 22 straight threes, there's some bad luck, some bad variance in there. They also ran hot in the other direction in the second half when they made 11 threes. If you average it all out, like, they probably should have made 3 or 4 more threes in this game. And that is the difference in a game where you lose by 2 in some ways. And they were 12 of 42 from 3. That's 29%, or actually a little bit less than 29%. That's going to get you beat a lot, especially when your opponent is 16 of 36. So they took 6 fewer threes, did Milwaukee, and made 4 more of them. That's a very big swing in a very, very tight game. Elsewhere, though, the Hawks were actually quite good on the margins in this entire game. And I like to talk about this because it's often overlooked. People talk about shooting all the time, and it matters. That stuff matters for sure. But the way that you kind of boost your overall win probability is to win the secondary stuff, rebounding, turnovers, free throws, etc. And the Hawks did a good job on the other stuff. They had 10 turnovers in the entire game. That's excellent. They got out and ran this game, 22 fast break points. They won the rebounding battle decisively, which is not the usual for this team. They had 33 assists. They just didn't make their jump shots. And that was basically the entire story on offense. Like there was a little, obviously play in and play out. There are things to nitpick and player by player, all that stuff. But as far as the overall process is concerned, I thought the Hawks did a pretty good job with how they actually played. But how you play and how you shoot are different things. And that was the case in this one. Defensively, they were more than good enough on the whole. Now, crucially, there were some very bad moments defensively. The second quarter was unhinged for a little while with the second unit. It was not great there, but they had about a 110 defensive rating at home. Like you're supposed to win that game more often than not, like, and by a lot more often than not, I would say. So they weren't dominant defensively by any means, but Giannis was just like, okay, he had 21 points in this game and 12 shots. Like he wasn't dominant. The only guy that they like kind of let get a little bit loose was AJ Green, but I thought the Hawks did a pretty good job defensively on the whole in this game. And the Bucks made a lot of shots. As mentioned before, 16 threes. There were some bad defensive breakdowns to allow some good looks for sure in that second quarter in particular. But the Bucks probably shot above their head from three, 44%. And the Hawks, by the way, had probably their best defensive rebounding game of the entire season, which is crazy in a loss. But the Hawks allowed 4 offensive rebounds in this game. They had a 90+% defensive rebound rate in this one. Like you're supposed to win on the margins when that stuff happens. And they won the turnover battle too by 3. Overall, this is one of my favorite stats to give most nights for context purposes, but the Hawks had 17 more shooting possessions than the Bucks. 17 more, and they lost. That is not the usual. That means the other team shot so much better than you did that they were able to overcome all of that, and that's what happened here because the Bucks shot better from 2, they shot better from 3 by a lot, and there you go. When you are minus 12 points at 3-point line while taking 6 more attempts, that'll do it. So, look, zooming back out now, that's kind of what happened in this game. Zooming out, it's tough to talk about because if you want to lump this game in with the 3 previous games, I totally understand that. And that's the reason why the frustration levels are boiling over in the fan base, and I'm sure the team is very frustrated as well, is because they just lost 3 games in a row. And quite frankly, those 3 games were pretty rough performances. They got blasted on Saturday night, which I talked about on this podcast a lot. That game was not as close as the final margin indicated. They got absolutely torpedoed on Saturday. And the Lakers game was bad. The Portland game was not very good. Like, that stuff matters in the context of the overall setting of the Hawks right now. The fact that they lost those 3 games. Today, if this game happened in a vacuum and they were like, kind of winning and losing sometimes on the other sides, it'd be very easy to kind of wave away this one because literally you could say, and I would say, that they lost this game because they had a historically bad shooting half. That's not the only reason why they lost, to be very clear, but it's the biggest reason why they lost. And that's like one to hand wave, right? Like I'm a big fan of like trying not to get too high and too low and all that stuff. Isolated this game alone, that is what happened. And it's frustrating, but the Hawks were like a 1-point favorite to tip off. They lost by 2. Like, that's not a crazy performance. It's just not. And they came back. If they got killed by 30, then no, you crush them and move on. But the problem is this game is not in a vacuum. It came after the previous 3 games where the Hawks played terribly. The Hawks didn't play terribly today. They just didn't. Like, there was some stuff, for sure. We'll get into that later on. But following it up and needing a win, like badly needing to get the win at home today. And yeah, big crowd, holiday, standalone game. I know it wasn't on national TV, but it was on Peacock, national platform, bigger audience, all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, you just got to get this one. And they had chances, as we'll get into later on. Even I would not want to ignore the rest of the game, but they had chances late. Like they had the ball in their hands, down 2. They a couple times in a row they took the lead and allowed a 3 on the other end. Like there was stuff to get to in this game. But on the bright side, if you want to find it, you can find it. The Hawks played fairly well for the most part in this game, but they couldn't get a win, and they really, really needed one in this game. So another 20-25. That is not where anybody thought that they were going to be, including myself. And there is some context involved. The injury absences, that stuff matters. But you look up on MLK Day, which is past the halfway mark of the season, and you're 5 games under 500, and that can't happen if you are where they want to be. So that's where I'll leave it for the first segment of this podcast. We'll talk about later on how the individual players played, how the game actually flowed, some of the late drama associated with the last possession and everything else in between. But broadly speaking, a rough game, rough moment for the Hawks, and one that I'm sure they'll be licking their wounds as they head back on the road starting on Wednesday with a visit to Memphis. All right, in a second, we'll dive into how everything else transpired in this one, more context, more analysis, and more, and it's coming up in just one moment. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us actually look at the messy parts of how we run our businesses and think there just has to be a better way to do things, and now there actually is. Your communication can be streamlined, and that's one of the huge upgrades you can actually make with your business. And that's why today's show is sponsored by the folks at Quo, and that's spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is actually reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with your customers. And I love how Quo makes everything very simple. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. In the meantime, everyone sees the full thread, which makes replying faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or from your computer, and you can even keep your existing number if you prefer to. Plus, Quo has smart AI tools that automatically log and summarize calls, highlight next steps, and more, so you actually never have details slip through the cracks in any possible way. It's no surprise that Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away from you. Try Quo for free and get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That's QUO.com/lockedonnba. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, thank you as always. Make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. If you ever want to go ad-free, you can do so now by joining the Everydayer Club, and you can go to lockedonhawks.supercast.com to learn more. And interestingly, the Hawks wobbled a little bit defensively to begin the game. They were actually down 7-2 after 3 possessions because defensively it was kind of a mess. But they settled in, and then the shot making on offense became the biggest story by far. Like, I think even beyond the walls of Atlanta, beyond the fan base, the national story of this one was like, wait, the Hawks are what from 3-point range in this game? And that was the story. They just were dreadful. In the first quarter, they were 9-29 from the floor and 0-13 from 3. 0-13 from 3. Dyson Daniels had a great first quarter. He had a couple second chance buckets, 8 points quickly, but everything else just not going in. Rotationally, there was a starting lineup tweak in this game. Corey Kispert started in place of Vit Krejci. I didn't mind that. They played the same amount of minutes in this game. I thought Kispert was better than Krejci. And generally, if you're new to the show, I don't make much compared to everybody else about starting lineups. They don't not matter at all, but they're overstated in my opinion as far as the impact. But Vit's been struggling pretty badly recently. Kispert's a little bit more stout and sturdy defensively as well. Not a good defender, but a little bit more physical, closer to a small forward than Vit is. The Hawks have one small forward. It's Ricochet. He's out right now, but I don't mind that change, and it worked reasonably well, I think, in this one. After the first time out, it was McCollum, Gay, and Krejci off the bench with Dyson coming back in this game. And then Kennard and Newell also played. So they played 10 guys in this one. No Keaton Wallace or Caleb Houston or the newly signed Christian Koloko, by the way, who's arriving on a 2-way contract. Koloko did not play. No surprise there, but as at least a center option, a defensively minded center option the Hawks didn't really have in their deep bench until recently. Dyson had a steal for the fast break, actually late in the first quarter to give the Hawks their first lead of the game. But they scored 2 points in the rest of the quarter, and they were down by 1, which is not so bad when you're 0-13 from 3. They were really good on the margins, but then the ball started rolling down the hill. In the second quarter, it was a 25-6 run by Milwaukee to go from Hawks down by 1 to Hawks down by 20. And they got smoked with Giannis on the bench, which is never a good sign against Milwaukee. The Bucks made 5 threes. They were hot, and the Hawks missed every single shot. After 20 minutes, they were shooting 26% from the field in the game. And as I shared earlier, they missed their first 22 threes of the game. Or 21 threes. One of those two. It was an absurd amount of threes. And look, crucially, only 2 of the misses in the first half were from guys who I would say are bad shooters or questionable shooters. Dyson missed 1. Mo Gay missed 1. Everyone else, Kispert, Johnson, Okongwu, Alexander Walker, McCollum, Krejci, and Newell, all those guys took at least 1 in this game and missed at least 1. Those guys are all fine or good shooters, and they all missed every single one of them, which is crazy. I will say, after what they did on defense in the first quarter, they made a lot of breakdowns in the second. That was the time of the game where the Hawks played their worst. They went to this lineup with Newell at center in place of Gay, which I understood trying to juice the offense a little bit, but the results defensively were hideous in that stretch with Newell at center, with Giannis back on the floor. Asa did have a nice play around Giannis on offense for a bucket, but that was not exactly doing him any favors. Just a lot of breakdowns defensively. They had a couple nice runs late in the first half, an 8-0 run. Like Jalen had a nice stretch where he had a block and then back-to-back buckets to get back within 12. But they lost the end of the quarter, down by 16 at halftime. And McCollum finally made a 3 in the last minute, but they were 1 of 22. By the way, this is not a record. So I said before, this is arguably their worst shooting half in the history of the franchise. I think it is, but there's context. So they have had halves in the recent history of the team where they didn't make a 3. Obviously, there was back in the previous eras of the league, a lot fewer attempts from 3 for one. I believe from what I was told today, the most threes ever missed to begin a game was 24 in the NBA by the Hornets. So it wasn't a new record. But the last time the Hawks, in fact, the only time the Hawks have attempted more than 13 threes and a half, they've always made more than one. So they have they had an 0 for 13 half was their worst to date. I'm not sure if that's better or worse than 1 for 21. I think it's worse. So regardless where you fall on this, I believe it was their worst shooting half in the history of the franchise. That's unfortunate to say, especially because the Hawks don't have any issues with enough shooting. Like they have a couple of guys who are shaky shooters, but as far as the guys who are playing this game, they have more than enough shooting available, and to miss all those shots and a lot of good looks. Like not all of those were great looks by any means. I've watched them all back now. I won't go 1 for 1 on this and play by play, but they probably took 4 or 5 bad ones, and the rest were like pretty good looks or wide open looks. And they just missed them all, and that happens sometimes. If you remove the heave at the buzzer that the Hawks tried, they scored 38 points on 49 possessions in the first half. That's a 77 offensive rating. Now that's terrible, but it's even crazier to have that bad of a scoring half, 38 points on 49 possessions, when you only have 3 turnovers on 49 possessions. That combination is almost impossible. To have an offensive rating that bad when you don't turn the ball over really at all, it just means you are shooting so poorly that nothing else matters. And that's what happened in this game. Defensively, they were poor at times, but still, their overall numbers on defense were totally fine in this game. They did make shots in the second half. I'll fast forward a little bit here. They were down by 23 early in the third after the Bucks made, I think, 4 threes in about 5 minutes or so. And the Hawks did score a lot of points after halftime. They had 23 points in the first 7 or 8 minutes. They had a 10-0 run. It chipped away. They got back with an 8 at the end of the third quarter after Quinn did a good job, I think, actually stealing the possession defensively. They used Mo and Dyson on a defensive-only possession. That was the right move. They got a steal, and then Nikhil drew a 3-shot foul to cut the lead down to 8, which is like, hey, you're back in the game. I thought rotationally that made more sense in the second half. They matched up better with Milwaukee, and they scored 34 points in the second half. They got it to 6 on the first trip of the fourth quarter, and then they got a turnover on defense, and then Asa Newell had a pretty rough turnover on the ensuing play that led to a 7-0 run by Milwaukee. So I was like, oh, that's maybe going to do it. Not like it's over, but the Hawks, to their credit, made a nice push after missing even more threes. So Pete Krejci missed a couple of wide open ones. He had a really rough game in missing one, but then Achilles Walker got hot, and he hit 7 threes in the second half. I believe 5 of them in the fourth quarter. And they, fast forwarding a little bit here to the end, they got back within 5 off of a McCollum baseline jumper. And then from there, it was like a lot of back and forth. After a timeout with 3:13 to go, Hawks down by 4, the Bucks scored, and then Nikhil had a drive, free throws, and they got a big stop, and then Nikhil had another 3 to make it a 1-point game with like 2.5 minutes to go. Then they got to stop from there, and Milwaukee was really trying to go after McCollum defensively, like in a way that was reminiscent of how teams would attack Trae Young. They were attacking McCollum similarly down the stretch of this one, and intently too. A couple things that I know Hawks fans will be dying about in the next couple of days. One of them is Jalen misses both free throws with a chance to take the lead with like 2 minutes to go. Those are big points. That can't happen. But then McCollum makes both. They take the lead. AJ Green hits another 3. He's been hot the entire game. Jalen then made a 3, and then they allowed a Bobby Portis sidestep 3 after Jalen kind of took a false step defensively, overran the play. So the Hawks led twice in this game, and immediately, both times, gave it back on a 3. And then Jalen's second mishap after the missed free throws happened when he had a bad turnover at the top of the key that led to a run-out layup by Giannis. So that's 2 plays where it's like, all right, those are going to be tough to overcome. Then McCollum got blocked out of a timeout, and it went out of bounds to reset the possession. But then Dyson found him for a bucket after that. But because of how long it took, the Hawks had to foul. They had a 2-second differential of shot clock and game clock, down by 2, so they had to foul. Kuzma makes both, and it's 4-point game again. Now the Hawks are huge underdogs now. Out of a timeout, Nikhil makes a 5th three of the fourth quarter to stay alive in the game. An awesome two-man action between Dyson and Nikhil to get that shot up. He makes it. They foul Ryan Rollins with 11 seconds to go, and Milwaukee up by 1. Rollins misses the first one and then makes the second, which is important context. So Atlanta's down by 2 with 11 seconds remaining. No timeouts at that point because they were trying to scramble. They were out of timeouts. That's actually totally fine. Rollins, though, made the second one. So it wasn't a total scramble at all. It was it's not a full dead ball, but you have time to kind of get yourself in order off of the make again. And 11 seconds to go. They inbound the ball to McCollum, and no one else touches the ball. It was kind of odd. They get a ball to Jalen, who kind of flips it to McCollum. I would like to know what was drawn up there. I don't know if we ever will, but it didn't seem like it was an accident that CJ had the ball. But he lost control of it on the right side. He kind of got locked up a little bit one-on-one, and he had more time than he probably thought he did. But once he got the ball back, he basically launched up almost a no hope kind of like heave shot, but with time on the clock. Like if he had known, that can't have been the shot he wanted at that point in time. It was very curious to me that Jalen nor Nikhil was involved in the action. Nikhil had been their guy in the fourth quarter. He'd been red hot the entire second half. Jalen's the best player on the team, and neither one of them are involved at all. Don't love that. McCollum has a history of closing out games. Like it's not like some bum off the street. Like McCollum has a history of being a big time shot maker and all that stuff. But I would not have probably run that action with only him ISO. That was not what I loved. And then also if you watch the playback, and yes, this is like nitpicking after the fact, he has multiple passing options after the initial bobble of the play. So I think it was a bad moment for McCollum for sure. As we'll talk about later on, I think he was actually better in this game. He played more within the offense and like functioned better on the whole overall. That will be forgotten, I think, for understandable reasons because of the end of the game and how it happened. Especially when you're a new guy and you're not the star. Like it's one thing if you trade for a star player and he becomes the guy. But when you're a new player without a history with the fan base, and then you have that moment on that stage in your home building and you not turn it over, but basically turn it over and then try to heave the ball, like that's going to be not endearing to the fans. I wouldn't crush him too much, but it was a bad play. Like he lost composure. He should have been looking to pass more. I didn't love anything about that play. So they had their chances though. I wanted to mention that on purpose. Like they had the missed free throws from Jalen, the turnover by Jalen, and then while Nikhil just tried his darndest to make them back in, kind of stay in the game, they had a chance with the ball down 2 at home with time, and they just got up a terrible shot. And that's where it ends. All right. In a second, I will go through the updates, by the way, and I use those in quotation marks on Porzingis and Ricochet, plus the latest on who played well, who did not, etc. from this game is coming up in just one moment. Tax season does not have to take over your entire life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever. Just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert from start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect with them online. They handle everything from W-2s, self-employed forms, and more, and work to get you every single deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get the updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives you real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it for you. For a limited time, you have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for $150, all in if a TurboTax expert does not file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, as I said before, the Hawks are still without Porzingis and Ricochet, and there was a small update on Monday morning. So I have said this before. I've probably asked to the point of annoyance for updates, asked the team for updates on Porzingis and or Ricochet for about a week plus now. I'm often bugging them about things like this, but they let it go for a long time without any sort of additional clarity to the injury report. Those guys have been out for a while, and they finally gave an update, but basically there was not an update at all. There were no additional details given. The release was that they are both, quote, progressing in their recovery, end quote, and they'll be reevaluated in a week. So that's basically a non-update. It's like a, hey, wait for a week and we'll see kind of situation. I'm not surprised by that. And perhaps some of this is that they don't have much to say. As a reminder, the injuries are Achilles tendonitis for Porzingis and a left knee bone contusion for Ricochet. As always, reevaluation in a week does not mean return in a week. Keep that in mind. And the Hawks have missed both of them quite a bit. I've talked endlessly about these small front court challenges that they have with Porzingis out, but also Ricochet is the one and only small forward on the roster, and they miss him badly on defense and the ability to run, all that stuff as well. So people asking me what's going on, I don't know. I will say one thing with clarity on this. I understand people thinking or wondering if this is trade related. Here's a little behind the scenes. Teams are not going to put a player like Ricochet in particular on ice for a week and a half, 2 weeks for no reason in the middle of this. Like I've said this before, Ricochet could be traded. He is not untouchable, but the Hawks are not trying to trade Ricochet. And if they were, they would not give him a made-up injury, which people keep speculating on. That's not what they would do. I promise you on that. So he is injured. That's what is happening here. And yeah, maybe they're being cautious. I don't know, but there's a real injury. They want to win games and they need him on the court as well, which matters here. So Porzingis, I understand there's so much more like uncertainty and the shroud of mystery around his entire thing because of the illness. I've been told repeatedly this actually is an Achilles issue for Porzingis. But if you want to roll your eyes about KP, I get it because on a human level, like he's just been out so much this year and there's so much uncertainty that I understand the reaction. With Ricochet, there's no reason to have that reaction other than just people thinking trades are always coming, which they're not. So yeah, every once in a while, a player, it gets held out of a game because of trade, like very close trade negotiations, like Corey Kispert in Washington the last time. That does happen on occasion. What doesn't happen is that a team's not going to sign their second year guy that they really like forward a fake injury for 2 weeks. That's not going to happen. So he's injured. We'll see. All right, to the game. Not a lot of greatness individually, but we'll get to it. 10 guys played in this one. The bench was largely ineffective. Luke Kennard, 2 points, 3 rebounds, and an assist. Luke was a little bit more passive than I want him to be. He had that stretch before he actually hurt his neck, where he was really playing well and being more aggressive. That has regressed a little bit recently. I don't think he was terrible, but just wasn't a huge positive for the Hawks. Moge, 10 minutes, 2 points, 3 rebounds. I think Quinn got frustrated with Mo's offense, which is understandable. Mo is a bad offensive player. He's also a very good defensive player, but I get it. So they went to Asa Moore. That was fine as long as Asa was playing in a reasonable construct. Asa's defense is not where you want it to be, but offensively he is better than Mo for sure. So 6 points from Asa in 12 minutes. He was fine, just a couple of bad defensive moments. They have a nice block though along the way. Vit Krejci is badly struggling right now. Both can be true. Vit started the season really well, shot it incredibly well, and as a reminder, Vit's making the minimum. Like Vit is a good value player to have on the roster. He's also been overstretched. He's not a small forward, and that's where he's been starting recently because they don't have anybody else to start until today. And also, he's just not shooting the ball well anymore. And if Vit, it's not quite this simple, but if Vit's not going to make threes, he's not playable. And he'll make threes. I think Vit's not going to suddenly be a bad shooter. But in the last 6 games, Vit is 5 of 32 from 3. 5 of 32 from 3. And if he's going to do that, which you don't know he's going to do that ahead of time, but if he's going to do that, he becomes a very obviously negative player. So it's been rough. He was only -8, but like it was bad. A couple of wide open misses. That's going to happen. Shooting slumps happen, but he doesn't give you a ton more elsewhere, which is why it's a little bit limiting. To the guys who played more, McCollum played 25 minutes off the bench. I know everyone will remember the last play with good reason. It was a bad moment for him. I think he would understand that and acknowledge that. It was not well executed. It wasn't well drawn up, any of that stuff. He was better in this game than he has been. I thought it was worthy of criticism that he was a little bit too zealous with shot selection the last few games. He was much more in the offense today. I think it's clear that teams view him as a negative defensively and they attack him, which was always going to be the case. I know people yelled at me for saying that post-trade, comparing him to Trey. I'm not saying he's not better than Trey defensively. That's never the point. The reality is he's not a good defender and that he's being attacked. But I think that CJ did play better than people will remember he played in this game because of the last play. It was a step forward until then, I thought. Kispert, 20 minutes, didn't do a whole lot, 2 points, a rebound, and assist. I thought he played better defensively and at least gave them a little bit more of a body physicality-wise than what Vit was doing. He was better than Vit, but They need more from that spot. They need Reece Shea, and there you go. Okongwu had a pretty nightmarish game offensively. 4 points on 0 of 6 from the floor. Got to the line 4 times. Did have 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals and a block. So like he didn't just do nothing, but offensively like was weirdly a negative. And usually it's Okongwu is a very potent offensive player. For instance, in the previous 2 games, I think he had 47 points. Like he's been a good offensive player all year long, but today it was not there for him. And that was a limiting factor. The backcourt was good. Nikhil had a rough start in the first half, like most guys did, just couldn't make a shot. And then he hit 7 threes in the second half. So he had 32 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and the 7 threes. Like he's been awesome all year long and was awesome in this game down the stretch. Dyson, 17 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds, 3 steals and a block. Like he was wonderful, honestly. Should have played more. Played 30 minutes. That's not enough for Dyson. He did have some foul trouble, had 5 fouls. That's part of the reason why he didn't play more. But I think that he was really, really good in this one. The shooting is still, boy, it's been a long time since he's made a 3. Like it's a problem, but he's so good at everything else that it's still like he's still a good player. And that was very clear in this game. And then Jalen Johnson had a weird first half again, but then was awesome in the second half, like dominant. So worth noting, Jalen had his first like real slump of the year. Coming into the game in the previous 3, he was 13 of 40 from the field in a 3-game sample, was not playing well at all. And then had a pretty rough first half again. And I was like, man, what's going on with Jalen Johnson? He's slumping. And then in the second half, he had 17 points, 10 rebounds, and was legitimately like assertive and good and played good defense. Ends up at 28, 16, and 6. Had the 1 bad turnover at the end, missed 2 free throws, like a couple of rough moments there, but played 40 minutes, including 22 in the second half. I still am like baffled by how much he and Okongwu played on Saturday, and that probably didn't help things. But I thought Jalen was a huge bright spot in the second half. And if that guy comes back, they had him early in the season. If he's back, that would be very helpful moving forward. So if you want to find some solace in something, Jalen playing like that in the second half was a good sign overall. That's all I have on the game portion of this pod. One more time. Frustrating loss, to be sure. Occasionally, it's like pretty straight ahead that a team loses because of one thing, and it was because the Hawks just couldn't make a shot for an hour. And that's unfortunate. From here, the Hawks go on the road again. They play against Memphis on Wednesday. Now, Memphis is not having a great season by any means, but the Grizzlies are playing better now. They are a little bit healthier now than they've been this year, but they're also in a weird spot. So John Morant has his best game of the year probably on Sunday, but they played these 2 games against Orlando in Europe. So they've only played, by the time the Hawks get there on Wednesday, Memphis has only played 2 games in like 10 days, but they had to travel across Europe and then back. So that's a weird spot. I don't know how they're going to respond to that. I don't know how the Hawks will respond to that. They haven't seen the Grizzlies this year, but worth noting that Memphis is not an easy matchup at all. Not a terrible one either. Winnable game, but boy, the Hawks need a win in the absolute worst way. Everyone knows that around the team, but they really do, because after that, they come home to play Phoenix, and Phoenix, if you've not been following this closely, Phoenix is having a great season. They're 25-17, which is like legitimately shocking to me in a lot of ways. But yeah, no gimmies in the near future because they have to go to Boston next week, all that stuff. So a win on Wednesday would be big. In the meantime, a lick your wounds kind of loss, frustrating, fan base frustration boiling over. I totally get why. It's maddening what's happened the last 18 games. They're 5-13 in the last 18. That can't happen. And more of this when it comes to analysis to come later on in the week. Thanks for being patient with my travel this weekend and some interestingly timed podcasts, but we'll be back on the grind as usual on Wednesday. So please stay tuned. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there, as well as on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And then also follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your MLK day into Tuesday, and we'll see you all next time.